Howdy peeps, I fancy doing a bit of an impromptu video today, just sort of covering the stuff that I've been talking about more recently on the channel. Now sure, you could argue that I do talk a lot about men's issues, I suppose men's issues regarding the dating world, and like my last video is dating apps and options and the ins and outs of that. And I often read, because of my experience with life, I've been one of those people that's been brought up to question literally everything, to get to the bottom of it, to find out what is going on behind the scenes. And in a way that does make me somewhat of a skeptical, I suppose, by definition. It's not so much that I'm skeptical, it's just I don't want to be BS'd along the road, right? And with a lot of my life experiences, I have unfortunately seen quite a lot of that from people and from other things. Anyway, I was just sort of scrolling through the list of videos that I've done recently, and I do sometimes wonder as to how interested the audience is in my viewpoints on certain things. Like I did one about a month ago called Lids, Celebrities, Freedom, Coercion and a bit of MGTOW. And I suppose what I'm kind of really getting at with all of that, because there's always going to be this thing of legislation getting voted in by government, obviously a lot of the time, well, all of the time, whether it's put through from the people or whether it's a decision they have made single-handedly, it doesn't make a great deal of difference. As citizens, we're just expected to obey, right? So with that, the reason I used the bash hats previously, the crash helmets, as an example, and sure, to a degree it might come down to a bit of ego, you know, in terms of one of the lids makes it just looks really big on some riders, whereas the slimmer versions, which aren't approved for road use in the United Kingdom, but they are in America, because different standards. I think it's the BSI kite you tend to look for over here, British Standards Institute. Now, that particular topic is something that caused quite a bit of controversy out in the US, where certain states demand that riders have to wear bash hats, skid lids, whatever you want to call them. Of course, a lot of people didn't really like that idea because they'd ridden motorbikes for who knows how many years without a lid. And like I said in the other video, I've been brought up on the other side of the fence where you always had to go out wearing a bash hat. So if they were to revoke that law over here now, I'd probably still wear, I mean, this admittedly it would be more so on like choppers, bobbers, that sort of thing, you know, custom motorbikes. I'd probably be more likely to not wear them on them than I would on something like a pocket rocket, you know, just because, you know, speed and everything else. I mean, at the end of the day, you're going to hurt yourself no matter whether you're doing 10 mile an hour, and if I say 100 mile an hour, I know a lot of the time we're looking at fatality, right? I'm just saying. But, you know, low speed crash versus a slightly higher speed crash, I mean, the results are always going to be different to the circumstance of what happened and, you know, what took place as to the damage that gets done to the rider. But the point being is, the point I come from is like, well, should it not be down to us, you know, the people that have actually paid for the motorcycle or car, whatever the case may be? I can use another example of that in a minute. So you pay for the motorcycle, you pay tax on buying the motorcycle, you then have to pay road tax, you then pay insurance, and you also get a premium tax on your insurance. So the common thing here is tax, right? Who gets taxes? Government, right? This is where I'm coming from with it. So for the government to then turn around and say, well, if you want to ride that motorcycle legally via legislation, you have to wear a crash helmet, right? Just for argument's sake. Well, over here you do have to. If you choose not to and you get caught, then you get fined, and then, you know, I mean, I suppose unless you are sort of like riding dangerously or something like that, there'd be no other charges, or so you'd think. But I mean, let's be real, a lot of the time the way cops see things is, oh well, if they're doing that thing, then they're going to be doing something else, and then they'll go looking for problems, you know, looking for further things to air quotes punish the rider for not falling in line and not obeying legislation. Now, sure, that might seem a little like, oh well, you just don't want to wear motorcycle helmets or something like that. And it's like, well, no. My point is that the sort of backing, it should be an individual choice. In the same sense, and I think I used the explanation of airbags in motor cars, automobiles, vehicles. There we go. I'll get there eventually. Now, over here we have something what we call the MOT, right? It's called the Ministry of Transport Test. So basically, all road-going vehicles have to meet a basic minimum standard to be considered road legal. Now, the airbag in a car, on the inside of a car, makes no difference to any things that are external other than the driver. I think I did use this example actually. Now, in a lot of cases where these airbags have deployed because there's been a bit of a bump or an accident, in quite a lot of cases where these airbags have deployed, they've been known to cause burns to face, knocking teeth out, breaking noses. I think in worst case scenario, I think there's been one instance that I know of where it didn't fail to deploy, but it didn't deploy correctly, and that caused serious damage to the driver of that vehicle. Again, airbags are something brought in by legislation through government, and you're probably thinking, well, why, what have I got it in for the government or something? It's like, well, kind of. Because I disagree with a lot of the stuff that they bring in, because I don't really see it as being a thing. And I suppose like a typically triggered snowflake, I suppose, not that I really would describe myself as that, but I find it offensive that these legislations are brought in, and even though items like airbags, you know, if you bump into someone, the airbag deploying isn't going to stop them in any way, shape or form. It's to stop the driver from supposedly killing themselves or causing themselves more injuries. Now, I'm not writing airbags off completely. Well, I'm not saying that they're bad and they shouldn't be a thing. My point is, it should be a personal choice whether you have that in your vehicle, and not only that, but whether you have it for yourself and or for your passengers. Now, you look at a lot of the cars now. I think it was Volvo. They first introduced RIPS, RIPS, rear impact protection system, and then eventually that moved on to SIPS, where they had airbags in the doors and in the centre pillars, and a lot of the newer vehicles now they have them in the seats, which is all well and good. You know, if you get T-boned at a junction or something like that, these things are going to deploy out to the side, but I'm not sure as to how well it would actually. I don't want to find out either. I wouldn't want to find out as to how effective they are with regards to their functionality, whether they're just there because, oh yeah, well, it's just another safety feature. But then that's just it. If it's not actually doing anything that you can prove it does anything, it is just a feature. You might, you know, drive for 30 or 40 years and never have an accident. So the whole point of having them is, you know, well, it's pointless, really. But again, you don't know when that's going to happen or if it's going to happen. But I think you should also be given the choice. Now, moving this on to the sort of further narrative of why some people are all in favour of government. So, and I'm going to bring this question up again, these couple of questions again. So, who actually trusts the government? I mean, you don't have to answer in the comments section if you don't want to. It's fine, right? It's a personal thing. But ask yourself, do you actually trust the government of your local town, your city, your state, your country, right? And if the answer is no, then, you know, this is where, you know, you really have to start questioning other things. This is why I tend to go on a little bit of a tangent sometimes when I get a bee in my bonnet about something that I'm not particularly happy about that may come through as legislation. Now, I've also said that this also comes down to being quite a political thing. You know, political parties and everything else. I've mentioned recently about the whole Tories, and, you know, you've got a lot of the youth running around today, and they're just throwing out slogans like Tory scum, screw the Tories, and all of this. But a lot of these people, the ironic thing, and trying to explain it to them as well, as waste of oxygen, if I'm honest, but they don't understand that by principles they are probably quite conservative within themselves and their viewpoints, but because the government at the moment is Tory, it is a conservative government, and they're constantly being hammered down by the media, which generally speaking is on the left. This is what I'm saying. You need to be aware of these things, of what is going on politically, because if you're not, you know, if it ever came down to a vote, chances are you're going to vote for the wrong person or the wrong party, and potentially end up doing more damage further down the line. Now, that doesn't mean that one political party doesn't lie any more or any less than the others. They all lie. They're all full of shit. So it does make voting a little bit more difficult, but to them it's just a massive shit show. They get to go and sit in the House of Commons, call each other names, call each other out on what they have and haven't done, and, you know, it's just a show. That's just it. It's just a show, and then we have to vote in. You know, you can't vote emotionally, because they're very irrational a lot of the time. You know, it's emotions change like the wind. You know, we speak about female nature and stuff like that, and how women often change their mood from one moment to the next, and in some cases it can be somewhat like treading on eggshells, which isn't a good thing. But then that's also relative as well, because if you think that, I think it's a slight majority, I think it's only like 51 or 52% of voters in the UK are women, and I would argue that a lot of them are leftists, to be honest. And it's not that I have a thing against the left. I mean, I have a few things against the left. I have probably equally as many against the right. For the most part, I'm in the centre of all that. But from a leftist point of view, if you're slightly right of Stalin, then you're a far right extremist, and that's just what they do. Like I said before in the other videos about when it comes down to classifying groups such as red pill, black pill, MGTOW, and all of this, we're all thrown in the same boat as far right, because the whole far right thing has become like a dirty word. It's like, oh yeah, well they're just, even though a lot of the guys aren't. You know, a lot of them are sort of libertarian. Some are liberals. Just saying it for what it is. Some are, you know, they are quite liberal in their political stance. But you've really got to look at the voting process for what it is, and how much we've been bullshitted. Now, the other sort of thing I'm going to bring up is, because I hear a lot of these things on the radio a lot of the time, these adverts, whereas you know, it's all money, right? This is the other thing, it's all money. And whereas they've changed, they haven't changed, they're going to be upping the low emission zone in London. I think it's called ULEZ, ultra low, or ULEZ, ultra low emission zone, around the outskirts of London. And the knock-on effect that this has on car drivers So the average guy going to work within these ULEZ zones, chances are if they've got an older car, they're being punished because they have an older car. Now, one of the things I will say about these air quotes older cars is they are putting out the same amount of carbon monoxide as a lot of the newer cars. And you're allowed up to 0.2% on that. And this is based on a what they refer to as the basic emissions test. And it has to hold you can have a 1.030 on the Lambda. That's the maximum it can have. Anything over that and it fails. So obviously there's too much CO getting into the exhaust system, and it's out of bounds, as it were. Meanwhile, there's nothing stopping these politicians from going to things like the G10 summits and flying in their private jets, but there's no emissions control for that. Now you could argue, well, jet fuel is different to, or aviation fuel is different to the fuel that we get at the petrol pump. It's like, well, yes, of course it is. They're a different type of engine. It still pumps out a lot of emissions, and when you think of the amount of fuel that they go through, I mean, it costs what, £2,000, I think it is, to have a helicopter up in the air for an hour. £2,000. I want a helicopter. I can't afford it. I did look into all of that years ago. But yeah, that's going off topic. But the sort of point I'm getting at is the whole mess that we're in now has been done. I argue it has been done on purpose. This whole division between men and women, and that's not to say that there aren't bad people out there that do bad things to others. There are, right? And they need dealing with in whichever way. Which I better not say that. They need dealing by the legal system. But it's true, and even with that, when you think of how biased the legal system can be in a lot of cases, mostly towards guys, it doesn't really fill you with confidence, because who gives the legislation and the powers to the police? The government. We saw a whole new array of laws come in 2020 that they were just given, and the cops in a lot of counties just ran with whatever they wanted to do. And as a result of that, it's like, well, what's going to happen to people's view of the police? Well, it's going to drop. It's going to plummet, as will the level of respect for the police. But and again, this is just based on the actions of some of the officers within these forces. Now, some of them are actually quite high up. I mentioned in another video about one of the, I think it was Derbyshire police. The chief constable was saying that if they need to go through people's shopping to make sure that they're buying essential items only, then that's what they'll do. It's like, who are you? Who are you? Well, they'll tell you who they are. Oh, I've got this badge and I can do things, and fuck you. Yeah, right. It's not going to be the best way to win people's hearts and minds over to be more supportive of the cops, right? I'm just saying. But this is just sort of it. This is all red pill stuff. This is all like eye-opening. The fact that, pretty much people generally know that the government are screwing them anyway. This whole, even putting people on things like furlough as of last year. Whereas I think it was a really noble thing that it did. It's not. I suppose it was nice of them in a way, because otherwise how are people going to pay their bills? And then, we've seen all these energy companies that are now going bust for very many different reasons. Probably because they're selling themselves out to another country out in the east. Just saying. It's probable, man. The country that I'm referring to has been buying land in Australia for a good few years now. Yeah, be suspicious, absolutely. And these are all the things that come into, from my perspective at least, what come into being red pill and being not woke, but awake. Becoming woke is something else. That's when you tend to screw things up, because you go with a narrative and you spout your mouth off and you don't actually look at any of the actual information. You just go on what you're told, and there is no questioning. That's why I always say, just question everything. And I suppose that is what the channel has been about more recently. So I'm going to wrap this one up for now. So If there's anything you guys would like to hear me talk about on the channel, whether it's my views or opinions or any kind of solutions to the way things are, that could be an interesting one. Should upset a few characters, but put it down in the comments and that. So, but this is my definition of being a red pill channel. It's not just about, oh, female nature, women are bad and all. It's because I know that's not the case. Anyway, thoughts, comments and opinions, feel free to jot them down as always. Thank you very much for watching. Like and subscribe as you wish, and until the next one, enjoy the rest of the weekend. Stay cool, stay free. Peace out.